Right. So today we'll be starting insulin and oral hypoglycemic drugs or anti-diabetic drugs essentially. Before doing that, I'll just give you a brief rundown of what diabetes is, just as a reminder. I think we've already discussed diabetes before, but anyway, now, diabetes, specifically diabetes mellitus, is a chronic metabolic disorder, okay, in which the patient will have severe hyperglycemia, increased blood glucose, and their metabolism of carbohydrates will be altered. It will not be normal. To a certain extent, even their lipid and protein metabolism gets altered as a result of diabetes mellitus. It will affect about 1 to 2% of the population of the world. Okay, uh, uh, they has a lot of them have hereditary, some of them will have acquired type. Now there are multiple types of diabetes. The commonly seen ones or the commonly treated ones will include, you have type 1. Type 1 diabetes is an autoimmune disorder. Okay, in this antibodies are created against beta cells of your pancreas, right? So I hope you read about pancreas and what are islets of Langerhans and what are their what the hormones they secrete. Now, autoimmune, because it is an autoimmune disorder, it will create antibodies against your own cells. In this scenario, it is creating in diabetes mellitus, your body will start creating antibodies against beta cells, and as a result what will happen is insulin is not secreted properly. Beta cells, if they get destroyed, insulin is not secreted properly, and it will usually occur in young children to adolescent. It'll So essentially, it'll occur early on as well. It'll start early and it'll continue throughout the person's life. uh, because of that, it is also called juvenile onset diabetes mellitus, because when they are young, they'll start presenting the symptoms of diabetes. Then there is type 2. Type 2 is also called maturity onset time. Okay, it will mostly occur in adults, and most of these patients are obese or they have a very sedentary kind of lifestyle. Okay, this is specifically because of reduced sensitivity to insulin. The tissue level and cellular level, pe, the sensitivity to insulin is lost. So each cell will have an insulin receptor. Almost all cells will have insulin receptors present on them, on which insulin comes and binds, and when insulin binds, glucose will be able to enter into your body. Okay, there is a internal
Mm.
receptor that comes on the surface. Only when that internal receptor is coming on the surface, you'll be able to take glucose inside. Okay, let us suppose this is that internal receptor. When insulin comes and attaches to insulin receptor, this internal glucose receptor presents on the surface of the cell. When it is presenting on the surface of the cell, that is how glucose is able to come inside. It is able to enter essentially into the cell. Without the action of insulin, without this action, this receptor will never be able to come here. Okay, hence causing hyperglycemia. That is type 2. Okay, impairment of glucose intake because of insulin resistance or uh, insensitivity to insulin essentially. Sometimes in this you will also have impaired regulation of insulin secretion will not be proper as well in type 2. Then there is type 3. There are multiple types. I'm only discussing the commonly found ones and the major ones. Type 3 will be because of it can be non-pancreatic diseases. It might be pancreatic diseases. A patient might undergo pancreectomy. Okay, a surgery in which you are removing a part of the pancreas or the whole of the pancreas. Generally, in road traffic accidents or things like that, a tumor hai, thing in such conditions you might consider removing the pancreas. It might be a non-pancreatic disease as well. Sometimes it might be drug induced. Some drugs can cause diabetes because they blunt the action of beta cells. Finally, type 4 is gestational. This will occur in pregnant women, essentially during pregnancy. Due to placental hormones, insulin resistance might occur. Okay. uh, Now, prolonged hyperglycemia in general is a bad condition, because diabetes की वजह से you can get a lot of other diseases. Even if the patient does not have cardiovascular diseases beforehand, by the time when they get diabetes, let's suppose it is type 2 diabetes, or even if it is type 1 diabetes, whatever it is, prolonged hyperglycemia for a long period of time will lead to various complications, and that will include premature atherosclerosis. A patient will have damage to their retina, retinopathy will occur, nephropathy will occur. You will see this damage quite a lot in diabetics, eye damage and kidney damage. There might be gangrene in limbs as well. Okay, because of excessive glucose being stored inside your limbs or inside the blood, it might lead to gangrene, especially if there is any sort of injury. You'll not be able to recover properly because hyperglycemia interferes with platelet function. Okay, capillary walls will thicken. You'll have decreased blood supply to different structures. A lot of troublesome symptoms will occur with diabetes. Hence, that is why diabetes is not just a disease; it is a syndrome. Because of diabetes, multiple problems will arise in a patient. Now, depending on the condition, you might have to give insulin directly, or you can give oral anti-diabetic drugs or oral hypoglycemic drugs. We'll start off with insulin, then we'll go to OHS. Now, insulin essentially has four major functions, or technically three major functions, specifically with respect to metabolism. First of all, on carbohydrate metabolism, insulin will stimulate glucose uptake. So it is affecting carbohydrate metabolism, lipid metabolism, and protein metabolism. How does it do so? First of all, in carbohydrate metabolism, because it is stimulating glucose uptake in your peripheral tissue, especially in your skeletal muscles and adipose tissue, it is decreasing your blood glucose levels. It will also inhibit glucose production by liver. So essentially, gluconeogenesis gets inhibited by the action of insulin on liver. That is the first part. Second, if we talk about lipid metabolism, insulin essentially inhibits breakdown of fat from adipose tissue. If fat is not being broken down, essentially it will also promote triglyceride synthesis. It will make sure that fat is in a very complex form, and most of the fats is being stored in adipose tissue. In diabetes, what happens is, because your body is not getting enough amount of glucose, obviously hyperglycemia ho raha, you are taking glucose as in you are eating food, but the problem is that the glucose is not entering into the cell. So from the perspective of your cell, it is malnutrition. Okay, that cell is not getting enough amount of glucose, because of which it will start seeking other sources of energy. One such source of energy will be free fatty acids. In diabetes, what will happen is, free fatty acids, which are formed by breakdown of adipose tissue, and whatever free fatty acids are being formed excessively, uh, essentially fats which are being taken from your this thing from your adipose tissue will be used up by the cells, and they will throw out free fatty acids. This extreme high amounts of free fatty acids present in your blood will be converted by your liver essentially into ketone bodies. Free fatty acids are converted into ketone bodies. Okay. The problem with ketones is that ketones will increase the acidity of your blood. It will decrease the pH, and it will make your blood more acidic. It will cause ketonuria. It will also cause ketonemia. Increased amounts of ketones in your blood and increased amounts of ketones in your urine is classic sign of impairment of lipid metabolism, or rather than impairment, I would say impairment of glucose metabolism, um, because of which more and more fats are being broken down. Over time, what happens is, because fats will not be enough, your body starts breaking down proteins as well. Normally, insulin promotes amino acid uptake, and it will promote protein synthesis. So, and essentially, it is an anabolic hormone, like a natural anabolic hormone. It will promote muscle synthesis or protein synthesis. The problem is that when you do not have proper functioning, or when you have diabetes mellitus, over time, after lipids are being used as energy sources, proteins will also be used as energy sources over time. and what happens is muscle wasting occurs at that time. So essentially the your body will start breaking down muscle and will start breaking down proteins that are present in your body. So those are the three major effects of insulin. If you give insulin as a drug, it will generally cause four major problems, side effects that can occur. First of all, hypoglycemia. This is the biggest concern when you are giving patients, the most common complication of insulin therapy. And especially if you give a very large dose, if you give it an inappropriate times. Okay, usually let's suppose you are taking a very small meal, and you are performing vigorous exercise along with insulin administration. Those are that is a recipe for disaster. Essentially that will lead to hypoglycemia. Patients will have sweating, palpitation, they will have tremors when they have hypoglycemia. Associated with it, their vision will blur, weakness, hunger, they will not be able to concentrate properly, they might become drowsy. Okay? And over time, if hypoglycemia is very severe, it might lead to convulsions and coma. This is not diabetic coma, this is hypoglycemic coma. Okay? There's a difference between them. Now you can treat this by giving oral glucose. You can give fruit juice. Yeah, orange juice is a decent source. Or in very severe cases, you can give IV glucose. Okay, it will immediately reverse the symptoms. Then another problem is allergy. Okay, uh, this is mainly due to contaminating proteins. Okay, patient will have itching. They will have urticaria, red spots throughout their body, angioedema, their blood vessels will swell and they will have edema. There rarely there might be anaphylactic reaction. Essentially anaphylaxis will occur. Anaphylactic shock ho sakta, but it is rare. Third major side effect will be lipodystrophy. Lipodystrophy essentially is a problem in which your lipids are being broken down and there will be abnormal distribution of lipids in a way. So what happens is when you give injection of insulin, when you inject a person with insulin, there will be atrophy of subcutaneous tissue. Wherever you are injecting, there will be atrophy of the site of injection. Okay, this might be due to immune response to the contaminating proteins which are present in your injection. You can also see enlargement of the subcutaneous tissue. Okay, in certain areas, wherever you are seeing local action of insulin, वहाँ पर due to lipodystrophy you might see lipohypertrophy. So the amount of lipid will increase in that area wherever you are injecting, and in such areas lipid absorption will become irregular because of that increased amounts of lipids. That is why whenever you are injecting insulin, make sure that you frequently keep changing the site of administration. Okay, if the patient takes one dose of insulin per day or two doses of insulin per day, how many will they take? Make sure that they are injecting it in different spots. Okay, so that in one spot there will not be any lipohypertrophy, there will not be lipodystrophy, and it will not interfere with the action of insulin. Now with newer preparations, this side effect is uncommon, but it does occur in some patients. Lastly, edema. Okay. Some patients who have severe diabetes will develop edema whenever you administer insulin, but it will subside as is. You don't need to give any drug to treat that edema. Now, coming to the drug formulations itself of insulin, I'll show you one image. Hold on. See, these are the main types of preparations of insulin. You'll get four main types of insulin. Okay. One is rapid acting insulin, short acting insulin, intermediate acting insulin, and long acting insulin. Okay, those are the four different types. Now, as the name suggests, first one, rapid acting insulin. This can be injected at the start of the meal, and what happens is, just before taking the meal, if you take rapid acting insulin, even after eating the meal, the amount of glucose being absorbed in your body will not be will be not be as much, and you will see that activity of insulin is very very high during that period of time. So whatever glucose is getting absorbed into your body will automatically start going into the cells. The hyperglycemia nahi hota essentially, and it will act very very quickly, hence the name rapid acting. Within 5 to 15 minutes of injecting, you will start seeing the effect of the drug. It will last for about 5 hours, 2 to 5 hours. Then there is shorter acting insulin. Short acting insulin will work for 4 to 8 hours. Their onset will also be slightly longer compared to rapid acting insulin. So 30 minutes, it will take almost 30 minutes for it to show its effects. It lasts for about 4 to 8 hours. Now, if you're taking short acting insulin, take it a slightly, almost half an hour before you are eating any meal. Okay? Then intermediate acting insulin will be taken generally in between meals, and you will combine this with short acting insulin. You might even combine this with OHS sometimes, depends on the patient's original condition. Okay? Intermediate acting insulin may, this fellow depends on what you are using, whether you are using NPH or you are using Undranet, their onset of action will vary a little bit. Okay? The duration of action will be the main difference. Generally, NPH will work for only about 12 hours. Ultralent will work for 24 hours. So even a single dose will work for a very long period of time. Intermediate acting insulin. Long acting insulin, 16 to 24 hours. Okay? It'll start working within almost 1 hour, and it'll show you effect for a whole day. So you can take once a day and you can be set for it. Okay? You don't need to take any more drugs. So if patients have a condition where they are not able to inject themselves again and again, in that situation, long acting बहुत अच्छा काम करता. You'll also get something called protamine, protamine zinc insulin bulk, that has a even higher duration of action. That will work for 36 hours. So all of those are different preparations of insulin that you find. Now coming to the drug interactions, when you are giving insulin to a patient, do not give beta blockers to that patient. As I think we covered this point before as well in CVS, but make sure that you do not combine beta blockers and insulin. Beta blockers inherently will act on beta 1 receptor and they will mask tachycardia. They will suppress your myocardial function. Technically, they will decrease your heart rate. A problem with that is when you give insulin, let us suppose the patient is having hypoglycemia. Okay, side effect of insulin. Now, the one of the first warning signs of hypoglycemia is tachycardia, because the patient's the heart rate will increase. So if you are giving beta blocker, beta adrenergic blockers with insulin, tachycardia will not appear. Okay, because beta blockers are suppressing the function of heart. Even if you are giving high doses of insulin which is causing hypoglycemia, severe hypoglycemia leading to tachycardia, the tachycardia cannot be seen because of beta blocker. So don't combine these two. Okay, and it will when you combine these two, hypoglycemia will go on for a long period of time. The patient might faint, the patient might have neuronal damage, so on and so forth. So increased and hypoglycemia for a long period of time is also bad. So don't combine these two, and don't combine them with salicylates, paracetamol and all of that. Salicylates will precipitate hypoglycemia. Okay? They will increase insulin secretion by stimulating your beta cells. So you are getting essentially double action. You are giving insulin injection, and if you give salicylates, that itself will cause hypoglycemia. So it can cause increased level of hypoglycemia, over more than normal level of hypoglycemia. That can be a problem as well. Now coming to OHS, oral hypoglycemic agents बोलते हैं लोगों को. These are drugs given to patients with diabetes mellitus generally, and what they do is essentially they work by two three mechanisms. One is they are increasing insulin sensitivity. So essentially, what happens, especially in type 2 diabetes mellitus, you will see that insulin receptors become insensitive. In the sense, even if insulin is present, that receptor will not respond to insulin. Okay, so one way through which these OHS will work is that they will increase the sensitivity of that receptor to insulin. So let us suppose there is this cell, and you have the receptor. Sometimes what happens is, even though insulin is present, this fellow is not able to enter here. It is not able to induce the function from that receptor. Okay, normally whenever insulin is attaching to the receptor, there should be signal transduction. That signal is sent inside your cell, because of which glucose uptake receptor comes to the surface. Okay, in a surface पे आता है and glucose is taken in. The problem here is that because the receptor is not sensitive to insulin, even if insulin attaches to the receptor, there'll be no response from that receptor. So essentially, what you are doing is, by giving OHS, one aspect of OHA is that some of the OHS can increase the sensitivity of insulin on that receptor, meaning that receptor will start responding to insulin now. If you give insulin, or if your body is secreting insulin, that receptor will start getting stimulated, and it will start causing signal transduction. It will send the signal that okay, insulin has come, let us send the glucose uptake receptor on the surface. That is one function. Then another function that occurs, or another function that these display, is increase insulin secretion. So they will directly stimulate your beta cells to secrete more insulin. Third is decrease glucose absorption, specifically from intestines. So what you are trying to do is, because there is already hyperglycemia in the patient, after you eat food, that food gets, essentially the components of food will be broken down, and by the time they reach intestine, they'll start getting absorbed, taking monosaccharides and different forms of food. Now, if you're stopping that intake of food or intake of glucose, there is lesser chance that the patient will have hyperglycemia. If the patient is already having hyperglycemia, you don't need to put any more glucose into their blood. So you are essentially stopping the absorption of glucose after eating a meal. Those are some of the ways through which OHS work. There are other ways as well, but just keep these in mind. Now, coming to the drugs itself, there are five major classes of drugs that will come under this thing OHS. First of all, they are drugs that increase insulin release. Drugs that increase insulin release. So in this, you will have two different drug classes. There are sulfonylureas. These are very popular. Quite a lot of people will use this, and meglitinides. These will also cause insulin release, but they are not as powerful as sulfonylureas. Now, for sulfonylureas में first gen, second gen both रहते हैं. There is first generation sulfonylurea, second generation sulfonylureas. First generation will include tolbutamide, uh, tolazamide भी आता है इसमें. Second generation is more used nowadays. Second generation is actually tolbutamide भी use करता है. I'll tell you when it is used. Second generation is more common in younger people. Younger is in 40s, 50s and all. Glibenclamide, clamide, and glimepiride. ठीक है. Glipizide बल्कि भी एक drug रहता है, that also falls under second generation. Now anyway, what do these do? Sulfonylureas will decrease your blood glucose by four different mechanisms. First, they will stimulate the release of insulin by pancreatic beta cells. They will stimulate pancreatic beta cells to produce more insulin. Second, they will increase the sensitivity of peripheral tissues to insulin. So they are increasing insulin sensitivity. That receptor of insulin will become more sensitive to insulin, and as a result, you will get better function out of the same amount of insulin. So as I told you, insulin receptor, if it becomes insensitive, no matter how much amount of insulin you pour onto it, you will not find any function out of it. So you'll not find any response out of it essentially. So in that scenario, sulfonylureas are helpful. They are increasing sensitivity to insulin. Third one, they will increase number of insulin receptors. Sometimes what happens is because of drugs or because of various conditions, the number of insulin receptor also gets damaged. Okay, so some insulin receptors, they will be irreversibly damaged. Okay, no matter how much amount of insulin you pour on it, it will not show any function altogether because the receptor has been damaged beyond repair. In that scenario, sulfonylureas help because they will induce production of insulin receptor. Think about it, insulin receptors are also proteins, so you can simply cause more and more receptors to be produced, which will increase the response from insulin. Now the new receptors that are being formed, they will be fresh, they do not have any sort of damage, and they'll respond to insulin very well. Lastly, they will suppress gluconeogenesis from your liver. Again, no more glucose will be formed from your liver, and it will decrease the level of glucose in your blood. Essentially, it is not letting any more glucose be produced in your liver, and gluconeogenesis gets suppressed essentially. Those are the four mechanisms of actions. So once again, first it will stimulate release of insulin, directly increases insulin levels from your beta cells stimulation. Second, it will increase sensitivity of peripheral cells, peripheral tissues to insulin. Third, it will increase number of insulin receptor, and fourth, it will suppress gluconeogenesis. So sulfonylureas are very very popular because of that reason. Okay, because it performs multiple functions, it is doing that. Specifically, if you see at a cellular levels, what it's doing on beta cell level, how it is stimulating insulin release. Let us suppose this is your beta cell. Okay, islet of Langerhans, this is your beta cell. Imagine now there are certain receptors present on beta cell, and your sulfonylureas, let us suppose you are using glibenclamide or any glimepiride, glibenclamide, whatever you're using, a sort of sulfonylurea. Whenever this drug binds to the receptor, what happens is inside the beta cell, potassium channel gets blocked. So there are passive potassium channels that are present on each cell, right, which will make sure potassium is going out. Okay, whenever potassium goes out, that cell gets repolarized. Essentially that cell के अंदर depolarization होने का chance नहीं है. ठीक है, it will not get activated. Now in this scenario, when you give glibenclamide or glimepiride, whatever in sulfonylurea you're using, there is a negative influence on this potassium channel. That potassium channel will be shut. Okay, it will block the potassium uh, channels on these receptors. So essentially what happens is, because of this, potassium efflux will be stopped. Potassium will not be able to leave outside your cell. Okay, if potassium is not leaving outside your cell, this leads to depolarization of the cell. No, more positive charge stays inside your cell, it will eventually lead to depolarization of beta cells. Whenever depolarization of beta cells occurs, calcium starts coming in. यहाँ से calcium अंदर आने लगता through calcium channel. So once again, when sulfonylureas bind to receptors on pancreatic beta cells, they will block potassium channels on the receptors. Okay, on the cells, potassium channels will be blocked and potassium conductance decreases. Potassium will not be able to go outside. More and more potassium will be present inside your cell. This increases influx of calcium in turn. Okay, depolarization of the cell occurs, calcium influx will occur, and because of calcium influx, beta cells will have small granules of insulin. Okay, these granules are present in these vesicles. Okay, essentially when calcium is being influxed, because of excessive amount of calcium, these granules will come to the surface, and essentially what happens is insulin is released outside. That is the mechanism of action. So it is forcing insulin release by stopping potassium release by causing depolarization, and due to depolarization calcium influx occurs. That calcium will cause degranulation of insulin granules, leading to exocytosis of insulin and insulin release. So it is essentially forcing your beta cell to produce or secrete more amount of insulin. That is the mechanism of action, other than gluconeogenesis and all of that. On beta cell it will work like this. Now coming to first gen and second gen. First gen, which is tolbutamide, this is a short acting agent. Okay, you can lesser hypoglycemia risk with this. Essentially, when you use tolbutamide, it is especially safe in elderly diabetics. Elderly diabetics may, there is a very high chance that they might have hypoglycemia, severe hypoglycemia जब उनके अंदर होता, they might fall and it might create severe problems. As such, first generation will have other side effects as well, a lot of side effects, but the biggest side effect, which is hypoglycemia, that does not occur as severely in first generation sulfonylureas. That is why tolbutamide or any other first generation sulfonylurea is preferred over second gen in elderly people. अगर आप elderly people में elderly को दे रहे हैं, elderly diabetics को दे रहे हैं, तो instead of giving second gen glipizide glimepiride, it is better to give first gen, because उनके अंदर hypoglycemia उतना severe नहीं रहता. They'll have other side effects, but at least this will not be a problem. Less risk in older people essentially. Second generation is more potent and longer acting as well, meaning hypoglycemia can occur in this. Okay, it will have fewer side effects compared to first generation, but that one side effect of hypoglycemia will be severe. That is why if you are using them in elderly, use it very cautiously. It is better not to use them in elderly, but if you are using it very cautiously. This will have lower side effects or fewer side effects when compared to first gen. Fewer side effects and drug interactions. ठीक है, उतने ज़्यादा नहीं होते. Both of these drugs are completely contraindicated in renal and hepatic impairment. Do not give it in patients who have kidney failure or liver failure. Coming to adverse effects, sulfonylurea's common adverse effect is hypoglycemia. Second gen will not be as severe, but there will be a little bit of hypoglycemia. It can cause jaundice, which is why it is contraindicated in liver failure. It will cause nausea and vomiting and disulfiram like reaction. So when we were discussing about alcohol, I told you what is disulfiram and what is disulfiram reaction. Abstain from consuming alcohol when you are on sulfonylureas. When a patient is on sulfonylureas, they have to be advised not to consume any alcohol, because it will create a very severe reaction due to due to the presence of sulfonylurea. Now, there are some major drug interactions that occur with sulfonylureas, especially. See, these drug interactions can be categorized in two ways. First ones, drugs that increase hypoglycemic effect. Meaning when you give these drugs along with sulfonylureas, hypoglycemia will be even more severe. Now, these drugs will include NSAIDs. Salicylates are a part of NSAIDs, warfarin, and sulfonamides. Please do not get confused between sulfonamides and sulfonylureas. Okay, sulfonamides are sulfamethoxazole and antibiotics. Sulfonylureas are oral hypoglycemic drugs. Okay, these will essentially displace sulfonylureas from their protein binding sites. So normally you know that drugs have a tendency to bind to proteins. Albumin, globulin, जो भी protein है आपके blood में, they will bind to that. And more often than not, you've already studied distribution, so I will not go into detail about it. But essentially, once a drug is bound to that protein, the drug will not show any effect. Only when drug concentration decreases, that binding gets loosened, and that drug concentration is maintained over a period of time. That is how you get the action of the drug for a long period of time. Now, let us suppose there is 10 micrograms of sulfonylurea in blood, and there is 10 micrograms of sulfonylurea which is bound to protein. Okay, this is a normal dose that you have calculated. This much should be enough in the blood to cause hypoglycemia. Now, when these drugs are given, NSAIDs, warfarin, or sulfonamides, these will essentially break this bond. They will displace the drug from protein binding site, and because it is being displaced from that protein binding site, instead of 10 mg being produced, this 10 mg gets added as well. So now 20 mg is present at one point of time in your blood. That is a problem that will increase hypoglycemic effect. Other drugs that do similar function, so these are acting by displacing proteins, right? Displacing protein binding site. Then you have alcohol, chloramphenicol, cimetidine as well. These three will inhibit the metabolism of sulfonylureas. If sulfonylurea is not getting inhibited properly, it is not getting metabolized, it will stay in your body for a longer period of time, meaning the effects of sulfonylureas will go on for a longer period of time, leading to increased effect of hyperglycemia. If you give sulfonylureas with alcohol, chloramphenicol, or cimetidine, these drugs will inhibit metabolism of sulfonylureas, in turn increasing the level of sulfonylurea, leading to toxicity. That toxicity will present as hypoglycemia. Then another drug interaction is on the opposite end. Drugs that decrease sulfonylurea action. Drugs that decrease sulfonylurea, decrease action of sulfonylurea. Now mainly इसमें आते हैं diuretics and corticosteroids. Now, corticosteroids was not a part of your pharmacology, so we didn't learn about it. But later on, when you start working, you will come across these drugs. Corticosteroids are generally given in allergic reactions. Prednisone, prednisolone, ये पूरे उसमें आते. Hydrocortisone, all of these are corticosteroids. When you give diuretics along with sulfonylureas, glucose levels will increase. So do not give both of these together. Okay, it will increase glucose levels in your blood. This in turn will cause hyperglycemia. It will defeat the purpose of giving sulfonylureas altogether. Then the second class of drugs which will come under the same major class subclass is meglitinides. Meglitinides may you will have repaglinide and nataglinide. These two drugs will perform a similar function like sulfonylureas. They will enhance release of insulin by blocking potassium channel on pancreatic beta cell, but they have weaker binding capacity when compared to sulfonylureas. So the amount of insulin that they can inspire, or the amount of insulin that they can uh, the amount of insulin that will get secreted when you give repaglinide and nataglinide will be significantly lower when compared to sulfonylurea. Same mechanism of action, potency is low. Okay, they will not be as potent as sulfonylureas. So those are the two drugs, not as उतना ज़्यादा use नहीं करते repaglinide, nataglinide. Then there is the second class of insulin lowering drugs, sorry, glucose lowering drugs. You have biguanides. This is one of the most famous classes, and one drug in this class, especially very, very, very famous for um, diabetes, metformin. Metformin is kind of like the poster boy of oral hypoglycemic drugs. This has been given for a long period of time, and recently there was discovery that metformin also helps in decreasing LDL levels, and it will have cardioprotective effects. Essentially, it will also have antiplatelet effects to a certain degree. So it is even better, when compared to other oral hypoglycemic drugs. Metformin is very, very commonly found. So out of one, let's suppose at least 1 out of 5 diabetic patients, no, I would say 3 out of 5 diabetic patients will have at one point of time consumed metformin. That it is that common. Okay, बहुत अच्छा काम करता है. It will not have any severe side effects. It will have one main side effect, but it in general it is pretty good. Now, this will lower blood glucose levels by insulin-like action on the tissue. So this is a mimic. This drug will mimic the effects of insulin. Now, if you are not able to directly increase the levels of insulin, let us suppose, ठीक है, uh, अच्छा इमेजिन करो, अच्छा, we'll directly give the scenario itself. Now we have a cell on which there is insulin receptor. Here insulin is supposed to come attach and produce a function. Now in diabetes mellitus, either that receptor is not working properly, or the insulin level is low, or whatever problem that might be. Insulin receptor itself is not present, whatever it might be the scenario. Metformin will act similar to insulin. Even if you have lower amounts of insulin, without directly causing stimulus of insulin or directly stimulating the production of insulin, metformin will act like insulin, and it will stimulate the receptor in the place of insulin. Okay. The mechanism how it does is unclear, but what we do know is that metformin will act like insulin and it will stimulate that receptor. Other than that, it will it will suppress hepatic gluconeogenesis, so new glucose formation will not occur. It will inhibit glucose absorption from intestines, so glucose absorption is not occurring, hence hyperglycemia is decreased even more. Think about it, if you already have hyperglycemia, you do not want more glucose to be absorbed from your intestines. So metformin suppresses that. It will stimulate peripheral uptake of glucose in tissues. Okay. In the presence of insulin, it will stimulate the effects of insulin in a way. Wherever insulin is present, it will stimulate the effect of that insulin, or it essentially it will stimulate the effect of insulin on the receptor, because of which peripheral uptake of glucose increases. So again, this also, like sulfonylureas, has multiple actions. Completely contraindicated in contraindicated in renal failure, hepatic failure, and cardiac diseases. If the patient has any sort of renal disease, hepatic disease, or cardiac disease, ये drug नहीं दे सकते metformin. That is the biggest drawback of this drug. Generally, you will see that patients who have diabetes mellitus, उनके अंदर they will have some associated cardiac condition. So you will not be able to give this drug. ठीक है? Then coming to adverse effects, metformin will cause nausea, vomiting. It will cause lactic acidosis. Rarely, but it will cause lactic acidosis. pH of your blood decreases. Not always, but sometimes. Lactic acidosis होता. It can cause metallic taste in mouth. This drug also decreases appetite. ठीक है? If you use it for a long period of time, it will start interfering with vitamin B12 absorption. So when you give metformin, it is better to supplement with vitamin B12. Cyanocobalamin supplementation you should give when you are using metformin for a long period of time. By long period of time, I mean months or years. ठीक है? If you use it for a long period of time, it will interfere with uh, B12 absorption. Okay. Now there are two, three more classes. We'll discuss that in the afternoon class, and we'll also discuss about parathyroid hormones. ठीक है? Parathyroid hormones है, thyroid supplements है. Parathyroid hormone में एक ही drug है essentially. If you know about PTH, that itself will be enough. But okay, now पढ़ेंगे. Then we'll go to thyroid. ठीक है?